Gauteng Finance and Economic Development MEC Lebogang Maile announced this week that the first installment of 3 billion rand, the overall SANRAL e-toll debt, will be paid on Monday. E-tolls had been an issue of contention for a long period, with civil society challenging their validity and constitutionality with the courts. Now officially, on the 11th of April, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi and former Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga led celebrations as the government officially terminated the e-tolls, however warned that motorists would still need to pay off their outstanding debt. The provincial government now sits with around 20 billion rand debt to pay off. We now speak to OUTA CEO Wayne Duvenage about this. Mr. Duvenage, thank you so much for your time and joining us this morning. Now, e-tolls officially terminated in April of this year. We know that OUTA has been very vocal from the very inception about the validity of the system. 3 billion rands of 20 billion rands will be paid tomorrow by the Gauteng government. What's your take on that?
Well, I think our first question is now, when did this get to 20 billion rand? It was 12 billion for the outstanding, their contribution to the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project's debt. And then there was about 4 billion rand for some maintenance towards these roads. We've always said, so again, we just don't know where does 20 come from. They really just cannot explain where this money and where this debt is coming from. But the question we've always had is, Gauteng never had to settle any of this debt because it wasn't their roads, it wasn't their decision. And, you know, I don't know how a province pays for assets or maintenance of assets that it does not own. But be that as it may, it now is setting out to settle some of this debt. Well, it has to cut its cloth. It has to do this under very tight conditions at the moment, financial conditions, because they are almost broke as a province. And our belief and view is that the provincial management, right up to Panyaza Lesufi, have just really got it wrong and shouldn't have entered into this debt in the first place.
So, I mean, when they break down the 20 billion, it's 12 billion as the actual debt, like you just said, 4 billion in terms of the maintenance, and another 4 billion which is going to interest. Now, the MEC also cited challenges in terms of the education and health sector within the province. What do you think will be the impact of provincial funds now being redirected to this debt?
Well, it's going to be dire. I mean, already last year we saw social services suffering. Many NGOs that used to be funded by the province no longer funded. The suffering that takes place, we've seen recently hospitals that are being decimated through poor management and lack of funds. So you and I, the public, we suffer as a result of this. And again, if they hadn't have entered into this debt arrangement, because they really shouldn't have, then we're gonna have some problems. Now, they did mention a while ago that they were going to look at other ways of raising funds, raising revenue. Well, that's you know, they still haven't come out or with any information on how they're going to do that. And then what we still see is, for instance, in the Beyers-Naudé extension, over a year now, those roadworks have been lying idle. Lots of money has obviously been spent. So we just get a sense that we have a province that is not managing its financial affairs properly. And we will suffer. Anybody suffers in any country or city or province where your management wastes its funds. And that's precisely what's happening here. I don't know. I think something has to give here.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that Gauteng is paying a debt of assets that they don't own. Do you think that this debt could have just been written off?
Well, you know, here's our concern. National Treasury covered the bonds for SANRAL when they took out the 21 billion rand. We've done our sums. If that over the years that SANRAL has had to settle this debt of the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Project, Treasury has already given them 26 billion rand. Had they been using those funds wisely, plus the 7 or so billion rand that they got from the few motorists that paid, they would have settled all of this debt. So we just cannot understand how there was any debt to settle in the first place. You know, National Province gives Gauteng 95% of its funds anyway. So it's, you know, just moving money from one department's bank account into another. Gauteng gets its money largely from National Treasury. National Treasury should have settled the debt which it entered into backing those bonds with SANRAL in the first place. This has got nothing to do with the province. It's got everything to do with national departments. And again, so they shouldn't have entered into it, or yes, it should have been written off, but it was never there for Gauteng to write off anyway in the first place.
Now, when we reflect, Wayne, in terms of the lessons that could have been learnt out of the situation in terms of consultation and engagement with the public before such huge projects of this magnitude are implemented, what would you say in terms of advice going forward when projects of this magnitude are then entered into?
Well, I think it's the same everywhere. We saw it with car power ships where they were trying to enter into these big projects. These are big capital projects. The first thing they need to do is to engage with society, but not just the way they do it so often, which is like a box-ticking exercise. They need to listen, because civil society and the experts and the modeling that is done on costs and the economics that these projects have on the country are there for us to share with government as well. It's not a case, we often feel it's a case of government believes no, they know everything, and their way, it's their way or no highway type of thing. So meaningful engagement is important for a reason, and the lessons then to be learned for government is, just do that. Do your public engagement meaningfully. But they still haven't learned. We see this is an ongoing issue. They don't seem to believe that society has anything to offer when it goes down this. What is a constitutional right for society is to have meaningful engagement.
So, Wayne, then what is your stance on road funding in general? I mean, our urban freeways will need upgrading in the near future. How do you suggest we then fund these in a way that doesn't adversely affect citizens in the way that e-tolls have?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Road funding is a national issue as well as a provincial issue and a local issue. So local government on the roads that you and I travel through the towns every day is done by local government financing through allocations of the revenues that they collect from their residents. Again, there's a big problem here, and specifically in Joburg, where a number of our bridges, over 25% of them, are not even safe to cross. And that's a serious matter. So road funding financing comes from the fuel levy, which raises about 90 billion rand a year, which Treasury then divvies out to the various provinces and SANRAL. By the way, SANRAL gets between 12 and 15 billion rand a year for its road maintenance. Then on top of that, it gets another 3 to 4 billion rand from its own toll financing projects. It runs its own tolls. And then we've got a question around the 3 long-distance toll concessionaires, where SANRAL is supposed to get funds from them, but doesn't, or certainly doesn't get sufficient. And we've been asking this question for some time, and there's a gross lack of transparency. So coming back to road financing is a combination of fuel levies, existing tolls, taxes that you and I pay at local government level as well as national level. And it just needs to be well allocated and spent. And what we find is that in South Africa, we spend between 3 and 4 times the amount we should on every kilometer of road we spend. We upgrade or build. That's the big problem here. We have got contracts that go to companies that are not fit. They're overpriced because there's so many middlemen and layers that want their cut. We should be getting 3 extra kilometers for every kilometer of road that we build on the average project that we've seen in this country for many years.
And how much are we paying, just out of interest, Wayne, in terms of a kilometer of road if we are doing maintenance and not necessarily starting a road from scratch?
Well, let me tell you, the upgrade on the Gauteng Freeway project, our sums, which, by the way, were fed from SANRAL's own numbers that they gave us in their financial projections for these projects. This 886-kilometer road was supposed to cost us no more than 6 billion rand. It cost us 18 billion, 17.9 billion rand for that 186 upgrade with 1 extra lane added, obviously, but largely that was an upgrade project. So that's the type of thing you see, and you see it so often. They shouldn't be paying more than about 8-9 million rand per kilometer per lane, and I'm talking provinces here. I'm talking a local government, and yet we pay far more than that. So we have a serious problem, and it all comes down to management oversight. As I said, this freeway, this big road upgrade on Beyers Naudé, it's been, the work started and stopped, and somebody's been paid. You saw as well at Liliengoya Street, in the one that blew up in Joburg over a year ago, stops and starts, and people were paid money and they're gone. Now, how does this happen in this day and age? You only get paid for the work you've done. So how do people get paid up front and then they're allowed to disappear and there's no oversight? It is all around oversight, lack of leadership, lack of management. We find it local government, provincial government, and national government.
Lastly, Wayne, so in expanding the problems where it actually sits, you say a lack of oversight and a lack of leadership. Do we also have a lack of financial management? And also on the flip side, do we have a lack of unethical service providers who are the ones charging 3 times more than what they should?
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite right. So, we've always said corruption, the business is the other side of the corruption coin. The challenge, though, is if you and I are running our finances and someone's trying to rip you off and you've done your homework, well, then you don't pay them. You know that's going to happen. The problem that government has is they allow the corrupt companies to come in and overcharge them, and then they make the mistake, well, I don't know if it's a mistake, sometimes so obvious, of paying them these overpriced rates up front. We see that so often, that a project, 50% of its project's paid for before it even starts. How crazy is that? And then the money's gone, and they say, oh, the contractor ran off with the money, so now we have to start again. That is bad management. So it's the person who owns and controls the checkbook, the payment, that is the problem here, and that is government. And yes, it is a case of bad financial management.
But I guess also, Wayne, it's also a catch-22 when in instances where government is not paying service providers on time, we complain that they're not really assisting in terms of those procurement and supply management processes where people are having to put out those services without being paid the money that they need to be paid. Well, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of OUTA, speaking to us there.